This is the Mike LaPetri Show. Nassau County property taxes are way too high. That's why you need Reassessment and Evaluation Services, Inc., the #1 tax grievance provider that offers personal service and high success rates. Grieve your taxes now before the deadline on March 1st, 2024. Call today for more info, 516-742-5180, or apply online at reassessmytaxes.com. Winters Brothers Waste Systems, the premier solid waste and recycling company on Long Island, servicing commercial, residential, industrial, and municipal customers across Nassau and Suffolk County. Locally owned and operating since the 1950s, over the last 70 years, Winters Brothers has built a network of regional operations, including multiple hauling locations, 6 recycling centers, and 9 transfer stations. Winters Brothers, solid and sound financial footing, a talented and professional team, top shelf equipment with top-notch service to Long Islanders. Go to wintersbrothers.com for more information today. What is up? We have Joe Salamone, founder and executive director of the Long Island Coalition Against Bullying, LICAB for short, because that is a hell of a name, the Coalition Against Bullying, the founder. What's up, buddy?
How are you?
I'm excited to have you on.
I'm excited to be here.
In studio, on stage, in front of the cameras. This is going to be great, man. I've been aching to have you on. I wanted to discuss all of you done. I mean, 10 years you just celebrated recently a 10-year anniversary. You have 10 years of working towards this cause, which I think is great. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
How was that 10-year? What did you think of it? Loved it. Great time.
Yes, loved it, but obviously loved it. But I honestly, it's crazy to think that 10 years is already gone.
Right.
I mean, I still think that, in some respects, you grow 10 years, but then in some respects, it still feels like day 5.
Right.
You're not even sure where 10 years disappeared to.
Time flies when you're doing something great, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, it's impressive where you started to where you are today. And I really just am curious about that. And for many of our viewers, how did you even decide to start LICAB? Why did you start LICAB?
My personal experience is I was a bullied kid from pretty much when I walked into middle school.
Yeah.
So 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Statistically, it's still the same.
Right. That's
3
the
years.
common time, right?
Yeah. So no different. I was the new kid, the weird kid, the quiet kid, the kid that didn't never really fit in. Always kind of, and still to some respects, even today as an adult, find it difficult to fit into groups that I'm not already present in. Some of that anxiety still exists even today. But, so difficult point in every middle school kid's life. By the time I got to 9th grade, I basically had said to myself that I don't want to do the next 4 years the way the last 3 went. And I started making, a plan for suicide. I started, writing my note and making a list of all the things I wanted my mom to give away for me when I wasn't here anymore.
Wow.
And, it was through the involvement of a teacher who, it was the second week of school. And just for everybody's, kind of context, my second week of high school was September 11th. So there was more than enough stuff going on to distract people and things like that. And yet this teacher, who barely even remembered my name, she said, why don't you come hang out after school, come down to my other classroom and join this club, yearbook club. I'm like, I have zero interest in being on the yearbook. Like at that point in time, I didn't want to remember a single person that I was surrounded by, let alone be part of making some kind of a commemorative book of everybody's faces.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of the backstory, behind me. She obviously, she kept asking me to come. I figured, listen, at this point, I have nothing left to lose. I will, so I'll go. And I kept going and I kept going. And I met other people who eventually kind of became like, allies for me in the hallway. And so I threw away the plan. But in 2013, I was in the waiting room of Good Sam in West Islip, and I watched an individual with special needs be openly mocked in the waiting room with his family, his parents. I don't know exactly what his ability, varying ability was, but he was nonverbal. So I would probably venture to say he was autistic, but, nonverbal. And, but you were still able to tell, the kids that sat to my left, and they were probably in their, 16, 17, whatever they were, mocking his hand gestures, the noises he was making, things like that. And you could tell that it was, impacting his parents. It didn't really seem to impact him, But, they got up and they moved him to another spot of the waiting room. And it just infuriated me.
I'd be enraged.
And I said, I'm like, at this point, it was 2013. Obviously, I've been out of high school for a while at this point. And I'm like, nothing seems to be getting better because nobody in the waiting room did anything to challenge their behavior. It just went on around us, and myself included. I'm not carving myself out. Nobody did anything. And nobody challenged their behavior, and nobody came to their assistance. And I just said, this can't be. I have a little bit of a temper when I get angry about something. So I said, but that's not going to help me in this situation.
Right.
So I said, the next day, I said, you know what? I don't know the first damn thing about running a nonprofit. I joked at the gala the other night that my experience at that point of running a nonprofit or having anything to do with a nonprofit was somebody else paying for me to golf in a golf outing. So I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know how to do it, but I just said, you know what? I'm going to start making some phone calls, gathering some people. I started with my friends and my family. That became the board. And, 10 years later, that's where it started to where it's at.
I think it's great because you see how you just decided to take action after witnessing just an absolute tragedy occur. I mean, I think that's exactly what is the purpose of nonprofits, right? To change the way people think, society acts, what happens to our communities, what happens in our communities, and something that LICAB does is really on all levels affects just that. And I find that very impressive in the sense of not even the fact that you didn't even know where to go or how to do it, but you just said something needs to be done, which is tremendous. And from now, so how does LICAB, what role does LICAB play to now help those who are being bullied? What are the services that your nonprofit provides to those in need, to those in the community throughout Long Island?
So, on a very basic level, the community can reach out to us directly if they're having an issue. And when I say the community, I mean the student themselves, the member of their family, a teacher, doesn't matter who it is, can reach out to us via our hotline number. And there's a dedicated team of people that are trained. They're actually pediatric residents. Some of them are pediatric residents from Cohen's Medical Center that are cross-trained. So they're pediatric residents, but then they're cross-trained in the area of bullying by us. And they field what is, by our most recent call volume for this year is already 80 calls this calendar year, but over 100 if you look at it based on school year. So we look at the metric both ways, what happens in a calendar year versus what happens in a school year. So the school year, so over 100. And when they get on the phone with us, we let them take as long as they need. It doesn't say, hey, it's been a half hour, we got to let you go.
Right.
It's however they want to spend along on the phone. And that could be everything from just crying, frankly, to, about some of the situations that are going on, to, getting angry, not at us, but just venting to us. And then beyond that, what are tangible things that we can do, to move the ball down the field in a positive way? How can we overcome this? Whether it's advice on how to deal with the school in a positive way, not looking at the school as an adversary, but how can both parties work together to resolve this? Because both parties have the same interest in mind. Contrary to the standard belief out there that schools are not doing enough, things like that, both parties want to resolve the issue. So what's the positive way forward to do that? We send care packages to kids, usually, elementary, middle school age kids, everything in there that's going to do something to put a smile on their face. Now, it's not just us sending, free stuff to a kid because, we feel bad for you. There is science behind the idea that kids will open up when they are given gifts. And what we want to do is make sure that those barriers to communication, which is usually what exists, continue to break down. And if we can make kids feel better about themselves and know that there are resources out there and that their parents are going to connect them with it and things like that, it creates an environment where that communication will continue to flow. So it's not just us sending free stuff because we feel bad for it.
Right.
But it is also giving a kid who often doesn't have much to smile about something to smile about when they open a box that's dropped on their doorstep that most of them didn't even know they were going to get because it's not them requesting it. that is filled of nothing other than what will relate to them as a person. It's not, nothing is made in advance. There's nothing canned about what we send. Everything is built and made directly for the person that's going to get it.
That's incredible.
So, it's not something like, this might resonate with them, it may not. We go off of a very clear form that is filled out for us, and we take what's given to us and we use our imaginations based on that. But beyond that, it's connecting kids to mental health resources. In the crisis that we're having in this country with mental health resources, what's happening now is sometimes there's not an availability to get to a therapist because they're not taking new clients. So we have built a referral source where we know everybody that we refer to has availability. And then in addition to the availability, it's there. We try to connect families to therapists that are no more than 15 minutes away. So again, removing that barrier to entry. It's not an hour drive. It's
right.
10, 15 minutes away. Everybody now basically will accept a virtual appointment, which makes it that much easier.
Agreed.
And then in addition to that, we also offer families financial subsidy so that if it's out of pocket, you won't have to worry about, at least for the first 5 sessions, paying for it. We got you covered on that. In addition to that, and that could be covering a copay, or it could be our contractual negotiation that the provider has to be in our network to reduce their rates in order to accept referrals from us, so that it's both a cost cap while also still connecting, the people who need it. And then beyond that, we get kids connected to martial arts throughout the island, not so that we can go and encourage kids to go beat each other up, but so that they understand that there's a mental aspect of this. It's the resiliency. Martial arts teaches you that the last resort is the physical part of it. It's the being able to mentally disengage a situation without having to result to that physical piece that offers a lot. Getting kids connected to dance, things like that. Anything that can be a personal development opportunity for them.
Yeah, so self-growth.
Yeah.
Encouraging that self-growth. Do you also go into schools and speak with students?
Yeah.
What does that involve, and what does that entail?
Last year, in just the 2022-2023 school year, we personally visited 209 individual classrooms.
Wow.
And we met with 6,860 kids.
Oh my God.
And that ranges from kindergarten through 12th grade.
Talking about what?
Everything from, in certain buildings, nothing we offer the community is canned. We have to have some controls around it, but at the same time, every building's needs are going to be different. So what we do is, before we go into a school, we have what we call pre-insertion meetings. Before we insert ourselves into their building, we will have meetings with the administration, with the mental health staff, to find out what are their specific struggles in their building. What might be happening in Lindenhurst Middle School, which we're very proud to be part of that local community, could be very different than what's happening in Sayville, another district that we're in, for example. So what do those needs look like? And then after that, we take the curriculums that we have and we tailor it to fit what's going on in that particular building. Sometimes they're the same across the communities. Sometimes they're a little different. And then what we prefer to do is, instead of getting 800 kids in an auditorium at once and talking at them, because you're not going to get participation, and most likely most of those kids are going to tune you out anyway.
Right.
What we do instead is we usually do kickoff assemblies per grade level to get the more rudimentary, what is bullying, what is it not, this is what it looks like, stuff like that, out of the way on a grade level perspective, and tee up the future conversation, and then push into classrooms and go classroom by classroom and talk to them, and 25 or 30 kids at a time, and drill down deeper. And then it opens up a much more back and forth dialogue. And that's how you actually start changing, some of the culture. At least we find.
Yeah. Do you find the students are engaging with you in those
100%,
classrooms?
100%.
What are some of the conversations that you're learning or hearing from?
So it could be everything from cyberbullying is not the biggest issue, which it kind of goes against conventional wisdom.
Absolutely. I would think that's 100% number one.
Yeah. I think the thing is now, and I even conceded it this morning in a building I was in this morning, that cyber has to do with everything. There are 4 different types of bullying: cyber, verbal, emotional, mental, social. Those are all 3 under the same heading. And then the last one is the physical piece. But the cyber component is there in everything. Whatever gets verbally talked about or argued about or gossiped about finds its way to cyber. And it could go the other way too. Whatever starts at cyber finds its way to verbal altercations and gossip and backbiting. And what gets fought about in the hallway or outside of school gets recorded and posted on social media. So there's a cyber component to everything. So when you really strip away the cyber piece, the next thing that they really see is the verbal stuff. Who's gossiping? Who's talking about who? Who's doing things like that? So a lot of those conversations come up in the classroom. They want to know what to look out for from their peers, which we talk a lot about, because you can't just go in and say, you got to stop bullying. Frankly, the position that we take is it's not our job to tell you right from wrong. It's not our job to tell you what you should and shouldn't do. Our job is to inform and educate so that in the hopes that they will find their own right or wrongs and they will acknowledge for themselves. Because you can go in and you can tell a 7th grader, don't do this. But are they going to really not do it because they got told not to do it? Or did you do what you needed to do to change their mind so for the long term they know that that's a bad move?
Right. It's a buy-in of the beliefs.
Correct.
It's the understanding. You have to buy in the person so that those values are now inculcated within, and that allows them to then, I guess, espouse that in their daily way of living, right?
Right. And what I'm very proud of is we do exit surveys with grades 6 through 12. Did you like the speaker? What'd you think of the material? Was it relevant to you? Things like that. And we're very proud of the fact that 79% of the historical surveys, so this is not just carving out one year or another, running a historical trend, 79% of the kids that we speak to between grades 6 and 12 will rank us a 4 or 5, or a 4 or better out of 5. So if you give them a scale, they're either saying it was perfect or next to perfect. And in addition to that, 94% will answer the question saying that their minds were somewhat or definitely changed based on the presentation they saw, with 57% saying absolutely it was definitely.
Wow.
So our job is to, once you start changing minds, you then start changing behaviors.
Yeah, and you're changing the culture of an entire school.
Right.
What? So you had those top those 4 types of bullying.
Yeah.
What were they again? It was
so social, emotional, or mental. Those are all pretty much the same thing. Depending on who's talking about it, they could be interchangeable, but they all mean the same thing. It's the social exclusion, who's leaving who out, the gossip, the backbiting, dropping of friends, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Then there's the verbal, obviously using words, physical, obviously, and then the cyber.
And the cyber within. Yeah, I find that. So what would you say is the number 1 type of bullying that you've seen from your experiences?
Honestly, the more families that reach out to us, there's always a cyber component, but they're still facing the issue inside of school with who's spreading what rumor, who's gossiping about them. I just spoke to somebody, a woman requested to speak to me directly just an hour and a half ago. And the whole thing was a rumor that started when the individual, her son, was in the 5th grade, is still following him and has just taken on new life. And it's not on cyber. It's walking down the hallway of his school and still getting called a fag. This is 2023. The fact that people are still going out of their way to call somebody who's, by the way, not even gay, a fag, just shows you the work that still needs to be done.
It's true.
But he's, it's not, there was no cyber component to what she said. It was all what's going on inside school, all who's walking down the hallway and bumping into him to say, you bumped into me, and now picking a fight with him. Just to start a problem. And there was no cyber component, other than maybe there's an issue going on and somebody else is recording it. But the main issue that was brought to my attention was really not cyber related. It was, I would say more verbal, physical, and definitely the emotional aspect of it.
How is that bred from the students, from the kids? Like, where is it the family environment? Is it the school environment? Is it a mix of both? Is it the friends within the school environment? I've always wondered, how is that culture created?
I think it's in several places. One of the things I did this morning was kind of to have lead a discussion with 11th and 12th graders about bias and discrimination and prejudice and how that all fits into the conversation about bullying. And the reason that I bring that into your question is because one of the things we talk about is where do our biases come from? And it's basically the same answer. It's stuff that we're taught. It's stuff that we have direct experiences with that create the shift in our own thinking. And it's things that we observe. So where do those things come from? Things that we're taught at home. They could be taught at home by our parents, by our siblings. Sometimes it's religious beliefs that shape our teaching. Things that we're observing that could be out in the world, the environment that we live in. It could be what we see on social media. Every single person with a pulse that has social media can admit that some degree they see something on social and it shifts their thinking even just a little bit. I mean, if you think about it, if that wasn't the case, you wouldn't have people who actually have professions, and I use air quotes on purpose, calling themselves influencers. Right. Because if they weren't influencing anything, they wouldn't have that title. So, one of the things that I think is, it used to be, and a lot of people still do say, oh, it's the parents, there's no structure at home. You could be the best parents, but the second your kid leaves you and they've got a phone in their hand, do you know what they're looking at? Do you know the people they're following? Do you know the stuff that they're watching on their phones? And, that's where a lot of it comes from. And a parent's job is even that much harder, because it's not just controlling the way you raise them. It's also watching what they're exposing themselves to and how much of that is influencing the child you're raising.
Throughout your 10 years, because this is very interesting, speaking of the phones, have you seen a change in the volume of bullying, the amount of bullying, types of bullying even, from 2013 to 2023 because of the phone? With the phone always in their possession, constantly on it. Did you see that grow over the years? As a result, there was a direct correlation, at least anecdotally, of the types of bullying that you saw, or even the language that was used, or did it mirror the current times of what was hot or trending, etc.? I just wonder that that you have 10 years of actual direct sight of seeing this.
Yeah, I would say for sure. But the reason may not necessarily be what most people might think. The increase in screen time is bringing about, and this is not, and I'm always careful to say this to kids, because you never want kids to feel like they're being lectured to. Yeah. You got to be able to talk to a kid when you're giving a presentation and you're actually, trying to change their mind. Don't just try to single them out and saying kids are the problem. Kids today, they're going to turn you off right away. We never liked it when they would dump to us. And, so the reason I bring that up is because these issues that are happening to kids are still happening to us as adults too. We're spending more time on our phone. We are becoming more and more disconnected from each other as humans because we spend more time interfacing with our friends through looking at a screen. And screens don't emit emotion. And I think that's where the problem is. It's not so much, of course, it's the activity being done on the phone and the fact that it's easier to bully and hate on somebody through a phone and technology, but it's also the lack of empathy that the increase in screen time creates, because you don't have the same emotional connectivity. I can say something to you now that may hurt your feelings. Maybe you would cry. That would impact me as a person, because I'd be kind of uncomfortable. I would want to know what I could do to fix it, something like that. But I could say the same thing to you through the screen and you still might cry, but I don't see it anymore, which means I don't feel the same impact, which means it's not that big of a deal. Even though on the other end of that phone, while you're sitting in your bedroom, you might actually be crying. But because I don't see it, it's a different feel. And that's where I think the bigger problem is that it's creating a dehumanized environment where we're not connecting or even willing to put ourselves in the shoes of other people anymore.
One of my biggest, pet peeves of when I see like children with the iPads or the iPhones, because that's what I would get concerned about, is that disconnection with reality, with the present time, with those around you, with the ability to socialize and pick up those cues. And that's what was so, for me, just alarming in the sense of what are the ramifications that has, consequences?
I'll give you a good example. We dealt with a situation where and there's a debate about cyberbullying that the kids will have. It happened this morning, where you ask them, is cyberbullying that big of a deal? And there is a large population of kids out there who fundamentally believes that you could just shut your phone off, get off the app, close your laptop, and somehow or another it goes away, it gets better. It depends on the situation, but again, that just shows you how passive they think this is. The example I would give is there was a case we dealt with where a TikTok account was created to appear as though it was somebody else.
This is a real case?
This is a real situation. A TikTok account was created, let's call person A was the person who made the account, person B was the person they essentially framed.
Okay.
The account started to share racially charged images and videos, and then started to comment on other people's stuff with the N-word and other racially charged comments. Again, this kid has no idea.
Right, person B has no clue this is created.
Well, they now know it's created because people are like, are you kidding? Why would you say that? And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. So eventually he finds out that this account has been created, but it wasn't until he was jumped by a group of students and beaten up because people now think he's a racist.
Wow.
So my question back to the kids is, what does shutting your phone off and walking away do to solve an issue that you're not really causing? Now, again, that's an extreme case about cyberbullying. Wow. Depending on the instance, yes, you can shut your phone off. You can walk away from it. You can convince yourself, I don't care. But that's where your imagination takes over. Because now you're dealing with two different questions. Do I want to see it? Because if I see it, I know what they're really saying. Or do I want to remove myself from it and then let my imagination paint a picture for me that may not be going on? And which one is worse, seeing it or imagining it? And the reason I bring up that example is because when you talk about the connectivity to humans, I had 3 kids tell me today, once the school and the authorities ended up finding out who made the account, because person A was able to be identified after a while, the kids disagreed with the fact that he faced the same, it was a boy, faced the same punishment as the kids who beat up person B. And my argument is, there wouldn't have been that physical altercation.
But for him.
Yeah. So why should he not face punishment? You can't just light a fuse, let the bomb go off, and stand by and say, I didn't do that.
Yeah.
There would not have been a fight but for your actions.
Yeah, you lit the fuse.
Exactly.
Lit the fuse to call the bomb.
But that's the difference in the connectivity now. I mean, kids have always never wanted, I'm sure, plenty of times when we were growing up, we didn't want to take responsibility for our actions either. But it's that much harder now, where kids are just like, I didn't do that, so I shouldn't be held accountable for it.
You were talking earlier about how it's common, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade is where bullying really begins. Does that percentage increase as the years go on or decrease? Is that like a peak time of bullying? Or how does that continue? What does the percentages look like? Do you know?
So our statistics on Long Island are different than most.
What's Long Island?
So Long Island is 1 out of every 2 students will admit that they've been bullied at some point in their life, and this is between 6th grade and 12th.
Wow.
1 out of every 2 students will say that they've been bullied online. 1 out of every 3 says that they've been on the receiving end of it verbally. And those statistics are a little higher locally than they are on a more national basis. But 6th, 7th, and 8th grade is definitely the peak.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Does bullying go away in high school? No. But
the numbers fall off in the sense of a
little bit.
Okay.
A little bit. There's still, if the situation is not addressed, doesn't matter how old a kid who bullies is, because if the individual is not stopped and their behavior not corrected, a 6th grade bully will be an 8th grade bully, will be a 10th grade bully, will be a bully in the workplace. They've got to have their behavior challenged. When it goes unchallenged, that's when it just continues and it kind of emboldens them. Yes, natural maturity takes over, where they may wake up one day and say, you know what, this isn't worth it. It's pointless. It's stupid. I'm not getting anything out of this. That happens too. The bookends to middle school. In elementary school, kids don't have, and I use this broadly, kids don't necessarily have the intent to cause somebody harm. A 2nd and a 3rd grader who have a conflict with each other because, who knocked over somebody's crayons, things like that. It's not really likely that they're doing it because they want to destroy somebody's life and make them a hell.
It's almost like
There's
an
no
impulse
malice,
reaction.
right? that's young kids, figuring it out. But again, there are exceptions to every rule, and we've heard plenty of them. 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, you've got now the increase in hormonal activity. They're trying to figure it out. They're trying to now go through an environment where they're not necessarily kids, but they're also not, young adults yet either.
Right.
Formative years like that. And, that's where a lot of, turning points for a lot of kids are. That's why middle school is usually the worst.
Does LICAB ever, you're there for those who are bullied, but has LICAB ever had discussions with those who are bullying of the why?
Excellent question.
Understanding, because so many people don't think about that. You're always thinking about, the person that was harmed, but the one doing the harm, understanding the why. That is it malicious intent? Is it something at home? Is it a reaction? Is it something else that I can't even think of? What do you find with that?
So today's society is not necessarily acutely in tune with the why, because people still look at it, and I agree. If you are the mother or father of a kid who's coming home and saying, "I'm being bullied," your first thought is not going to be, "I wonder why the person's doing it."
Of course,
it's going to be, "We need to solve this and make your problems go away."
Naturally.
But society is more reactive than we are necessarily preventative. And you can look at plenty of examples that lead you to believe that.
Yeah, I mean, government as a whole,
right.
Or it's like that. It's reactive versus preventative.
Right. When it comes to, there's an argument even to be made about what we do. Is it reactive because we know it's already happening? I like to look at it as both. It's reactive for the situations that might be going on today, but it's preventative for being able to solve them what might happen in the future. The reason I bring all that up is because we look at it as kind of cyclical. If you want to break the cycle of bullying, you have to pay that much attention to the person who's on the receiving end as well as the person who's doing it.
Right.
Because even look at my own example. I wasn't the only one that my bullies were picking on years ago. But, everybody else was willing to kind of stand up for themselves. They want to go after the people or the individuals that are not likely to stand up for themselves or challenge their behavior in any way. But even if you were to take the school bully and send him home, a lot of times, just like an iceberg is bigger under the surface than what we see on the top. It's a great way to imagine bullying, and that's the way we kind of talk about it. The motivating reasons for why the behavior at the surface is happening is huge because of what people don't see. The issues at home. How much attention are they getting from their parents? Are both parents involved? Is there a divorce going on? Is there abuse in the home? Things like that. Because again, you don't applaud them for bullying because of course that's negative. But you understand a little bit that they're reacting to something that is happening to them that they're reacting to negatively. It could be that they themselves are being bullied, and in turn they're taking what's being dumped on them and dumping it on somebody else. So I think we have to understand that. So more to your point, yes, we help those who are the targets, but we are also here to offer the same services to those who are exhibiting the behavior. It's a different conversation, though, because you need entirely different buy-in. It's easier for a parent to call us and say, "My kid's being bullied, what do I do?"
Right.
It's an entirely different conversation for a parent to own the idea that their child is doing this. In 10 years, has it happened? Absolutely. Ironically, it happened on yesterday morning. We got a phone call, and the readout was, just looking over the summary of the call, the caller was a father, even more interesting, a father who was calling because his son is the bully. And he's like, "I don't want my son to keep doing this. I want to help him. I understand that he's causing other kids pain. I want to help them get over that. And I want to make sure that my kids stop doing this because I understand that something's causing him to do this, and I want to get to the bottom of what that is." Exactly. It is a different conversation, though, because we still live in a society where parents are more apt to go, "Not my kid."
Yep.
So it's a entirely different approach.
Yeah, I would think that just being able to understand that and trying to find preventative ways so that you stifle the creation of the bully, essentially. That to me would be something that would be most fascinating in the sense of a macro way of solutions. But that's why it's, and I don't know if you could ever do that. I think it's more, I think that way of thinking is idealistic, frankly, because it's not realistic, because you're always going to have the bullies, you're going to have the gossipers, it's about mitigating those that do in fact exhibit those behaviors.
It's not just that. It's kind of a package deal. We have to work on challenging kids not to demonstrate that behavior, and if they are experiencing something, how to navigate those difficulties in a more constructive and positive way, and as well as getting kids to understand and draw out the resiliency that's in all of us. It's a package deal. You got to teach kids the proper way that we want them to behave, as well as getting other kids to understand, listen, not every single person that you're going to come across in your life is going to be nice to you. Mm-hmm. You've got to deal with some level of adversity. And unfortunately, I think we've kind of shifted our thinking on this, but there was a time over the last 10 years where we were definitely in a mode of, feelings and emotions and everybody kind of catering to everybody's individual feelings.
Yeah, coddling.
And we moved away from the idea that kids need conflict. They need conflict because they've got to learn how to deal and disengage with conflict and not just run away from it. Every adult has to have experienced it, because when you get to adulthood, you're going to experience a whole different set of adversities that you're going to need to know how to problem solve. So it's not just as easy as stop doing this. It's stop doing this, and if this happens to you, understand that you're better than how somebody might be making you feel. Let that, nasty thing that somebody keeps saying to you roll off your back. If you see the person coming, try to walk down a different hallway, things like that.
Yeah, it's being more empowering,
right,
and control over the self and the reaction. Which is very difficult. I'm reading currently the Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, and in it, he was the former Roman emperor for back in like 100 something AD. Anyway, he's a famous philosopher, a great Roman emperor, and what he speaks about in Meditations are the private journals, his diaries that he never thought was ever going to be released. And he just talks about himself and his ability to control his emotions, his ability to recognize that those that verbally assault you, they harm you, that harm is due to you allowing it, as opposed to you controlling it and being able to reject those words and controlling your mind and emotions, which is very tough, obviously, for children, specifically under the age of 18. But it's that mentality that I applaud you on creating and instilling at such a youthful age into others.
I think of course, it's everything is situation dependent. In some of the cases that we deal with, it's not just as easy as saying, you're better than that.
Right.
The rumors, the kids who never want you around, those who will not only go out of their way to tell you that you weren't invited, but then let you see that they had a wonderful time without you.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff is, it's easy on the one hand to say, what, I don't need them. But that's if you have other people that you can draw on for, social connection. If the kids that you thought were your friends are now suddenly excluding you, and now you're finding yourself home alone every Friday and Saturday night while the rest of the world is having a great time without you, that's difficult, because Saturdays can be long when you're the kid sitting alone in your bedroom.
FOMO.
Exactly. And so I do think it's situation dependent, but largely it's got to be both. We've got to teach kids that, that they have resiliency, they have inner strength, and when to use it tactically and when to, disengage their own situations. But again, it's a lot easier said than it is done.
Do you find that those who are bullied or the bullies or the bullied, does their parent household in terms of single parent versus dual parent household, does that ever have effect? Or do you find a statistical correlation in that respect?
It used to be that the common wisdom was that the kids who act this way, who demonstrate the aggression, were because they came from terrible houses, where they had no support. And yeah, there's truth to that too. But there's also truth to the idea that the more strict a household is, having all these rules, it'll cause rebellion, and that rebellion will cause kids to act out. So there's a very fine line there. A lot of issues do stem from not getting enough attention at home. Honestly, it was one of the reasons why I never really brought up so many of my issues that were going on, because my parents didn't have the greatest, marriage. My mother was working 2 jobs, and statistically speaking, at least our statistics, it's the mama bears who are taking a more active role in this. That's why I said earlier, interestingly enough, it was a father who called to say that his son was the bully, because typically in 10 years, 86% of our call volume originates from the mother.
Wow.
So for a father to call us is a huge thing in the first place. Secondarily, for a father to call and say his son is a bully and I need help with it.
It's like 1%.
Right. So Which
shout out to the father, by the way. Nice
Absolutely,
job.
For sure.
Nice job being recognizing.
Sure. Home life plays a huge role in it.
Yeah, I always think that's the essence of, frankly, everything is that home life is the foundation with the parents, and the work-life balance, which obviously, as you know, is getting harder and harder on Long Island, which must have an impact on students and ability with their relationship with their parents, and just, frankly, how often they're around.
Exactly. There isn't. People ask, is there a socioeconomic impact, connected to bullying? But usually they're asking that question in the idea of, frankly, the question is usually asked, does bullying rates go down in more affluent communities, or do they thrive in more underserved communities? I think that, and I'm talking purely in conjecture now, that you can make the argument there's a socioeconomic to how bullying begins, and it's not because of wealth the way those questions are asked. It's, is mom or dad a single parent that needs to now take on a second job, right, because it's costing them more to keep the roof over their head or food on the table? Is there are they feeling like they're not getting parental support because parents are having to work longer hours, right, to make more money, to make the ends meet a little quicker?
But that can go either way.
Absolutely.
It could be the person that's working 80-hour, 100-hour weeks with at a corporate job, or the same be where 2-3 jobs to make ends meet on the other side. So I could see both ways, where it's no matter what, it's neglect, quote unquote, of that familial parental relationship.
Yeah, I mean, to bring up a quote or a semi-story, but from our mutual friend Monsignor Jim Lisanti from Massapequa.
Shout out.
Absolutely. On Sunday, his homily had a lot to do with the idea that, wealth doesn't necessarily make you happier. Mm-hmm. People with $1 million and 5 different cars and whatever, when you look at their home lives, it's not exactly that the money's making it better. The person who works 80 hours a week, who drives the Malbec Mercedes, the question you'd have to ask is, do they have kids, and how happy are their kids? Because right, how often do they see mom or dad who's working the 80 hours to drive the Malbec? But we look at things like, well, they're driving a Maserati, or they're driving a Mercedes. They're fine. They have no issues. But that's surface. That's superficial. The issues are, that might be all fine and well on the surface, but what's their home life actually like?
I remember quick analogy out east. Out east, when I was like 20 years old, I was working for an environmental organization doing grassroots canvassing, and I was out east going to the big, huge homes and knocking on those doors, and not once did I speak with the homeowner. Not once, because they were all working. Mm-hmm. And it was like 6, 7, 8 o'clock, still working. The kids are home, right? But it was always with the maids or whomever it was that was maintaining the home, babysitters, etc. I found that very interesting, and it goes in correlation, exactly what you're saying, where it goes either way with that. One final point before we wrap it up. Demarcation line with schools, parents, cyberbullying. Where is it? Where is that, where it's the responsibility? Is it still the responsibility of the school? Is it the parents that have to monitor and maintain and watch how the children, how often the children are on, if they even are on?
So
where is that line?
New York State has the Dignity for All Students Act, which really blurred that line. It really put a lot of the onus back on a school now. Now, when we were kids, if we were getting bullied, the school's position was, if it didn't happen on school grounds, if it didn't happen on a bus or a school-sanctioned event, a play, whatever, not us.
And that was easy. That was an obvious line.
That was obvious. Now, because of social media, the nexus now has connected home and school in a lot more of a direct way. Now, a DASA level offense, which deals with bullying and discrimination, is if there is a reasonable expectation that what goes on out there in the community can find its way inside the building and create a interruption in the educational environment for even just one kid, the school has grounds to get involved in it.
So if there's a party on a Saturday, a birthday party, and there's a discussion or an event, and then there's problems that occur, that's going to affect the school. But
so let's say, using that same example, there's
Right.
a fight that goes on that was recorded, and now it's getting passed around.
Right.
And yes, come Monday morning, if that fight, now they're not going to get involved because right off the bat there is a video. What they will do, though, is monitor the situation. If that video now causes an issue, even though it was recorded at a party on a Saturday night, yeah, the school can get involved in it. The line is, and honestly, that puts the schools at a disadvantage because now they're no longer just monitoring the four walls of their school building.
Right.
They're really monitoring everything, including things that they really have no tangible touch to. So when
and they can't prevent.
and they can do nothing to
So
prevent
it's just
it.
that's purely reactive now.
Yes.
It's like, okay, we couldn't do any. We can't be there on a Friday night, Saturday, or Sunday, and this occurred.
And you can understand why, because there's no magic wall around a school. Whatever happens on the weekend, if it's a big enough drama, you know that that's going to end up in their environment. So it makes sense, but it does make their job dramatically harder.
How does LICAB now play a role or intertwine with all this then in that respect?
So in two different ways. The first way is we do a lot of training for administrators and faculty on the Dignity Act, what constitutes a DASA level offense, how to properly navigate those investigations to really get down to the nuts and bolts of what the problem is, different remedial outcomes, things like that. Conversely, specifically when it comes to cyberbullying, I was appointed to Governor Hochul's cyberbullying task force.
Congratulations.
Thank you. That is supposed to be, weighing in on crafting policy related to cyberbullying across the state. And I know that there are different proposals out there that will hopefully, mitigate that to a degree. But what the concern is, and this has happened, it happened just this past July, families will call us, will say, listen, honestly, this is something that you need to call the police about. Having a group of kids walk past your house is intimidation. They know what they're doing.
That's harassment.
That's harassment.
Yeah.
That needs, especially, listen. If
this isn't bullying now.
If you're 16, 17, 18 years old.
Now we got criminal offense.
Right. So, but the problem is they'll go down to their local precinct and they get told by their local precinct, this is a quote by a desk sergeant in July. This sounds like something you want to bring to your principal. Well, it's the middle of July. There's no principal.
Now what?
Right. So part of our job now is going to start being really to start working with, we've had basic conversations with liaisons at the police department in both counties. Not to say that anybody's doing anything wrong, but we all know we could all use resources to be better equipped to do our jobs. And I have to give credit where it's due. The conversations I've had, the Suffolk County Police Commissioner is very interested in hearing this kind of stuff and shaping, changing the way officers are reacting to things. Listen, I don't want anybody to misinterpret what I'm saying. I'm not attacking anybody specifically, but we can't not do our jobs because we want to pass it off to somebody else. And an answer in the middle of July, like this sounds like something you want to bring to your principal, is no bueno.
Yeah.
There's no principal for another 60 days.
Yeah.
What is he? What
no
is that
school.
kid supposed to do? Exactly.
It's summer. There's no school.
So
not even a principal.
Community resource officers largely are great when it comes to being able to work with a school. They're fantastic. But it's, and listen, everybody's got their own things. People are tired. Everybody's overworked. But, we have to remember that we still all have responsibilities to the communities we serve. And part of that is providing them accurate information.
People that want to support your organization, people that need your help and your services, how can they find you, call you, reach you so that you can provide LICAB services or be there to lift LICAB up and donate to your cause?
So for anybody who needs help or needs to reach us, the easiest way of doing it is 516-777-7709. We have a confidential and private email address, help@licab.org, licab.org. Is monitored by the same people who also monitor the phones if somebody calls for help. Probably in January this year, we're going to have a live chat that people could text us directly. That's not out yet, though. And our website for just more information or to very generously make a donation is licab.org.
licab.org. Joe, this has been absolute pleasure, really enlightening, really insightful. You do a great job. I mean, from day one till now, year 10, it's been tremendous, and you should be really proud, honestly, of what you've accomplished and all these students that you help year after year after year, these kids that you make a difference in. You show them the light in life, and I think it's really wonderful what you do, man, and how it all started and what you endured to now be where you are. Is truly inspirational. I just want to say it's an honor to have you on this show, and thank you so much for sharing your story and sharing everything that LICAB does.
Thank you for giving me the soapbox to stand on for a little while.
My pleasure, my friend. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.